In this lesson titled Other Functions, we're in Workbook 03, Creating Formulas and Functions, and we're on Worksheet tab, Functions. In an earlier lesson, we talked about how useful it is to use AutoSum and AutoAverage to quickly create a function for sum or average. I'm going to do that now to get us started because I would like to see what all of our new salaries are. We're going to add up their bonus, their raise, plus their base salary, also plus a commission that they earned. So we want to add all these up with AutoSum. I'm simply going to click here, and I'm going to click on my AutoSum button. We see here that it made this entire selection, but I don't want all of this. I only want starting here with commission, so I'll click and drag, and I get just the commission, the base salary, the raise, and the bonus all added together, and hit enter on my keyboard to accept that selection. And there's our answer. We also learned earlier that autofill for formulas can work by dragging them down, but they can also work by simply double clicking and simply autofill that all the way down. I'd also want to reinforce from an earlier lesson that these formulas all changed. As I click on them and look in my formula bar, I see that they made the relative change so that it stays accurate all the way down, selecting the new data that it needs as the formula comes down. So you can see here, this is all about row D. This is all about row 9 right here. And if I click here and look at the formula bar, you can see this is all about row 8. Well, let's get started with looking at other functions. And some that are common, maybe not so common, but kind of fun. And I have some here. So here's some descriptions, like if we wanted to count the number of cells that have data in them versus counting all the cells that have data. Here we have a description, count number cells. This only counts the cells that have numbers in them, so it excludes titles and names and addresses and things like that. We're only looking for numbers. And here's a different one called count all data cells. So if it has any kind of data, it'll count it. Whether it's alphabetical or numeric, it'll count it. So let's take a look at these, count and count A. Well, because we want the answer to go right here, I'm going to click right here and type equals and count, C-O-U. But as soon as I do that, before I even finish, I see it's already figured out the selection. I can either double click this to select it, or because it is highlighted, I can also just hit tab on my keyboard. So I'm going to hit tab to select that. It went ahead and put it in for me, formatted it, and started with that all crucial parentheses. Every time you have a function, it always starts with a parentheses. Now if we look down below, we'll see that just like before in a previous lesson, we learned that it shows us what is needed next. In this case, it needs to know what the value is, what the numbers are that we want to count. So that can be a range. So I'm simply going to click here and select my names and my numbers, all of that. Select that. We see our selection here and hit enter to accept. And so it's saying from my selection, there's 112 cells that have numbers in them. So let's see how this count A is a little bit different. I'm going to say equals count, and I see here I have count A as my second choice. So if I hit tab, I would get count. In order to get count A, I either could double click it, or I could use my down arrow key to select it, and now I can use tab. And we're ready to go to make our selection. I'm going to make that same selection to see if we can see any difference. I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard, and we can see that this number is slightly higher because it is counting any data in the cell, including names over here on this column A. So we've got all of these added to it. Very good. Well, you may be familiar with the mathematical term median. And sometimes we need to find the median of some numbers. It's a little different than just the average. But let's take a look at that one. We're going to say equal. I'm going to start typing MED. It looks like it's the only one. So I'm just going to hit Tab. Now sometimes we are tempted to hit Enter when we see what we want, but this would be Tab if what we want is highlighted. I'm going to hit Tab, and we're ready to put in the numbers. So I want the median of all of these salaries. What's the median of these salaries? I select all of those and hit Enter on my keyboard, which will give us the last parentheses as well. I don't need to put that in if I hit Enter. Otherwise, I'd have to physically put in a last parentheses. But just going to hit Enter, and I can see the median is 5222. Okay, here's one that's kind of fun. You can find the first, the second, the third, the fourth largest number, or the first, second, third smallest. And in this case, we're going to use large. There's another one called small. We're going to use large here, and we just say equals LA, and as soon as I hit that, it's the only one, so I'm going to hit Tab. And as soon as I hit Tab, large is no longer highlighted. Now the word array. So it wants to know the whole array. What am I looking at to find the third largest? What numbers do you want me to look at? Well, I want you to look at all these numbers. I want to know the third largest salary. So I select all of those. And now you see that it needs a comma after array. So I'm going to give it a comma. You can see that little comma there. And as soon as I hit comma, the emphasis changes to this letter K. And letter K in an Excel formula or function means the special number that it needs. In this case, it needs to know, do you want the first, the second, the third? What do you want? Well, I want the third largest, so I hit a 3. And now I can put in the parentheses manually, or I can just hit Enter. I'm going to put it in manually this time, and then hit Enter. And we see what the third largest number is. Well, just to make my point, what if we decided we want to know the first largest number? And I'll need to change that to an ST, won't I? There we go. First, I want this to be the first largest number. So I double click to edit my formula, and I see my 3 here. I'm going to backspace out of that and hit 1, and then hit Enter to accept. And so now I see my first largest number. It's 5261 because it is rounded out the number. Okay, let's move down here to standard deviation. So I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to start typing the word standard, ST. And when I get there, I start seeing I have lots of choices. Down here we have standard dev and standard dev P. So if you're familiar with these equations, you would know the difference. And you'll also know that there's a little caution next to them, just telling us that there's more advanced versions available, and these are kind of the older versions. But this is the one I want. I'm going to double click it to accept. And it says, okay, now the emphasis is I need to know what numbers that you want. And I want the standard deviation between all of these numbers. And I'll hit Enter to accept. Okay, there's our answer, 174. So here's all of the functions that we've used. Count A and count, and we saw the difference. Median, large, and standard deviation. We also learned here that it doesn't matter where our answers are. They don't need to be next to the data. They could be anywhere we want them. We just have to tell it what the references are. Well, I want to do another one called rank. And rank you really do need to see right next to your data in order to make sense of it. And rank does what you might think it does, and it will rank these numbers compared to the whole list and to each other. So I'm going to type equals, and I'm going to start typing the word rank, R-A, and I see it down there at the very bottom, rank. Now there are times when you're using an older function, and it might not show up at the list. You might have to type the entire one to see it. In this case, we see it here, so I'm going to double click. There is rank. Now the first thing rank wants us to know is what number do you want us to rank? Well, I want you to rank this number right here. I want to know how this ranks. Now I'm going to hit a comma because I see a comma right there telling me I need to put that in. And now it wants to know the reference. So in other words, I'm going to tell you the rank of this number here, H2, but what do you want me to compare it with? What's the reference I'm comparing it with? Well, the reference is all of H, right? I want this entire column, so I'm just going to click here. I happen to know there's nothing below here, so I could do all of that. Otherwise, I would click and drag and just get my selection. And now it has all the information it needs, and I'm just going to hit enter. And there it is. This one actually is ranked first. So this is where copying our formula and function comes in handy. So I'm going to double click right here to do a quick copy down. And we can see the ranking. Now, this is kind of interesting. This is ranked 1, 2, 3, 4. That's because, of course, this has already been sorted in that rank. But what happens if we change the order? So to change an order, we'll be talking about later, but just very quickly, I'm going to click anywhere in this range of data. I'm going to right click, and one of my choices is sort. And I could sort here, for instance, largest to smallest or smallest to large. I'll go here. You'll see that it changed my rank to correspond with this new sorting. But if I went over here and sorted these names, I'm just going to click on one of them and right click and choose sort and say A to Z. And you can see here this is kind of scrambled. And this is when it might be kind of handy to have a rank so that you don't have to sort the numbers like this. So we learned a few more functions like count and count A and standard deviation, as well as kind of an oldie called rank that is still pretty useful.